Hey, if you'd like to earn CEUs for this webinar, join the Safeopedia community at the link in the description below. Now on to the show.
Well, thank you, Scott. Thanks for having me, and thanks for everybody for joining. Um, Today, I'm just going to talk about the impact of decision making, and I put the dots in here on organizational health and safety. It's not organizational health and safety; it's organizational health and safety. So, we're going to talk about the implications of decision making on both of those things, and how safety is such a great indicator of organizational decision making. Just quickly, I've been in the not only the EH&S world, but the operations world, profit and loss responsibility, run many different functions and organizations. I've been in that realm for over 40 years and have been doing these kinds of things that we're going to talk about today for quite a long time. So I've had a lot of sampling of many, many facilities all over the world. And what I'm going to tell you is I see the same stuff everywhere. So this is kind of the common thread, and that's decision making. Decision making to me is where it's at. So let's talk a little bit about that. Why is my thing not moving here? So we'll talk about some foundational principles that are basically going to kind of outline what I talk about today. There's a common cause and effect relationship in all organizations. If maybe you don't realize that or you don't see that, I'm going to help you see that. And that's the common thread between the elements of decision making and how they evolve through an organization to create either benefit or risk. And it's a common process in every organization. And it's not just about safety, it's about everything that you value. Ethics runs this course, quality runs this course, profit runs this course. Risk and benefit always live together. That's kind of one of my mantras. If you want to really understand where your next risk is going to come from, understand where benefits gets created and where people perceive benefit. Benefit invites risk to the party, folks. So don't just chase risk, understand benefit. Okay. Decision making is the fulcrum of risk and benefit. As I said, it is really the centric place where we need to start looking at the health of our organization and health of decision making from the top of the organization down through to the coalface, the folks that they're at risk. And organizational decision making occurs in tiers. And we're going to talk about the tiers of decision making in an organization and how they influence the steps below them. Decision making on the front line is predicated by decisions upstream. Those folks that in the field are making decisions based on the way they were set up, their processes, their values, their expectations, in the real world. That's what predicates decision making. Most organizations do not have a defined decision-making process, one that creates balance, balance between risk and benefit, and also balance between imperatives and values. I go to organizations and most do not have a defined way for people to make decisions. And I think that's pretty problematic. Decision-making related roles and responsibilities and risk gatekeeping need to be well defined. Everybody needs to be a risk gatekeeper that makes decisions in the organization because risk passes through them, whether you're in HR and you're purchasing or wherever you are. So that's what we're going to cover today. The first principle, again, is there's a common cause and effect relationship in all organizations. This relationship that I created, I'm going to say over 30 something years ago and published it, as you can see below, in the ASSP Professional Safety Journal in 2018 in an article called It's Bigger Than Safety. This is the way that I look at organizations from culture and climate, which I look at in terms of organizational and operational factors. Organizational factors are, say, if you're in a corporation, the values, the imperatives, the measurements, the metrics, the leadership style of that corporation is in every entity, okay? Whereas the operational factors are specific to maybe a certain country, a certain business unit, a certain location, a history of location. All of those things are more operational factors. They're related, but in many times somewhat different. And in those organizational and operational factors comes the way we make decisions and the environment that gets created from those decisions, which creates future decisions. The management system, and I'm not talking here about safety management system, I'm talking about a management system, whether it be quality, safety, or whatever, is designed to help us further the management of those values. And the more predictive into decision making a management system can be, the better it does that. You don't want your management system chasing problems. You want your management seeing them coming. Because if culture and climate creates imbalanced decisions, it gets downstream into processes and programs, the way we actually go about doing work, the way we hire, the way we procure. And if that's imbalanced, so focused on benefit and not as well on risk, it creates excessive risk. And excessive risk living long enough creates unwanted outcomes. And this, as you can see, has nothing to do with specifically with safety. This has to do with everything: ethics, quality, cost, profitability. Everything follows this path. Everything. So thereby, we're going to take a look at a story that basically I use to talk about how that actually works in an organization. About 7 years ago, I was asked by an EH&S director to help a board of directors in a company that basically buys and sells grain after they had two fatalities in a grain silo, to help them understand how much fatality risk they really had. So I basically convinced them that they not only needed to look at fatality risk, they needed to look at the dynamic of the organization, how the organization makes decisions, and I offered that up, and they were okay with that. So that allowed me to really get to the real reasons of what was going on. So I set up an assessment process. We sampled operations, talked to people, talked to executives, probably 7, 8 operations across the Midwest where they buy and sell grain. And the way the company works basically is there are some folks that sit in a corporate office that look at screens of Dow Jones futures, and they make decisions about when to buy and sell grain. They communicate those to plants like the one you're looking at, that basically have a plant manager and a plant sales team that contact the farmers in that area. And they're told when to buy grain, what type of grain to buy, and what price to pay for it. And the way the company makes business is it basically turns that grain into profit by timing the market. So the criticality of schedule and cost and all those things are very important, and that's mostly on the hands of those plant managers. To understand that, there are two different types of grain generically. There is good quality grain and off spec, so grain that's in spec and grain that's out of spec. Out of spec grain has a lot of particulate, a lot of moisture in it. If you hold on to that grain too long, you end up with problems, fires, heat, and bound up mechanisms in silos. So the day these folks died was the day that the silo got bound up, and these guys went in and tried to untangle the mechanism and unbind the mechanism. And because they didn't follow the lockout tagout procedure and confined space procedure to a T, they died that day. When the company did its investigation, they basically had blamed the workers for the fatalities based on the fact that they didn't follow the lockout tagout procedure to a T. But when I did my analysis, I looked back into the folks in sales and started to realize that these risks that were created in plants, and in every single plant I went to, every single plant manager had a problem with the salespeople that were just telling them things to do, but not realizing the ramifications of those things. And holding on to that grain, that off-spec grain too long was a major issue in every single plant. So when I went to talk to them about the issues, one of the things I said to them is, I said, the problem here is not just the fact that these people didn't follow the procedures. The problem is that your paradigm for how you make revenue and profit creates fatality hazards every single day. And nobody who's making those decisions is reconciling safety. Nobody with those decisions has responsibility for safety risk. Okay, you're handing that all down to the plant, and they cannot manage that. So basically, what I also said is that those two individuals that you blamed for dying that day have been your heroes for the last 10 years. They're the people that went into your bound up silos, rescued your schedule, rescued your profitability. And you weren't watching how they were doing, but you were happy with their result. You were happy that they were safe because they didn't get killed, and they got the plant up and running, and they were your heroes until the day they died, and then you made them zeros. I said, shame on you. Shame on you for not really understanding the imbalance in the way that you're making your business and business decisions. And so you can see how that flows from culture and climate and the way we make business decisions in the plant and their roles and responsibilities down through a management system that really was ineffective at communicating that and instilling those responsibilities high enough up in that tier of decision making, which led to these decisions which created extra grain risk, which ultimately created exposures to people and killed those two guys on that given day. But that risk had been around for a very long period of time. So principle number two, risk and benefit always live together. If you're just chasing risk, you're missing out on the reason for why risk has been brought to the party. Okay. And I will tell most safety professionals that there may be risk experts, but most of them are not benefit experts. We need to be benefit experts too. We need to understand benefit better, not just talk risk. So if you take a look at the decision making in the grain company in the same light of the relationship you can see over here on culture and climate, corporate revenue creation always trumps safety. Well, there's no responsibility for safety at that level. Okay, so you can see the balance between benefit and risk right there. That benefit revenue creation was king, and that pushed through the whole process, and that went all the way down to the plants, where the plants were challenged dealing with how they wanted them to create revenue. And along with that method, those processes created lots of risk in their silos and ultimately bound up those silos and ultimately caused the exposure to those two individuals, which ultimately caused their death. And that's how it works. And that's how it works for everything that happens that's an unwanted outcome. Maybe with not that degree of clarity, but there's a lot more to this than the simplistic way I'm looking at it today. There's a lot more details to this, but if we don't dig into this far enough, we're really not going to understand how to prevent risk and ultimately prevent harm. So the next principle is decision making is the fulcrum of risk and benefit. Decisions happen in tiers. If we look at organizations, just like in the grain company, we had a first tier decision, which was basically this is how we make revenue, and this is how we deploy that down into the plants, which then goes down to the business unit and facilities. So if the decision at level one is not balanced and comes down to the plant in an imbalanced fashion, I will tell you most plants don't have the capital to undo the risk that was given to them in that first decision. And they spend a lot of time trying to get capital. And if they can't get the capital to undo that risk, what they end up using instead of CapEx is OpEx. And what OpEx buys you for controls many times are lower level controls, rules, procedures, and training. And those controls then move to the third level, which we hand the person at the coalface at risk the low level controls, because that's the best we can do when we say, okay, be careful. And in a lot of times what I see is people using low level controls because the level one decision wasn't made well, and then the level two decision wasn't able to change the dynamic of that hazard or that level of control based on their availability for capital. And you will see this quite a bit. And I will see this walking through facilities all the time, the results of this kind of imbalanced decision making. Most organizations do not have a defined decision-making process that creates balance, okay? And what I'm talking about here is actually having a way to make decisions that everybody can use, that is consistent and repeatable across all levels of the organization, operationally, functionally, and down to the shop floor or out into the construction site. Okay. Everybody has the same way of making decisions. And when you have that, then you can measure the health of the decision-making process, not just waiting for the health of the results. Results are deceptive in decision-making. Okay. You can get good results from bad decisions. Okay. You can drive 90 miles an hour and look at your phone all day long and say, well, man, I'm getting a good result out of this, but it's not a good decision. Okay. So that is something that we need to understand, and we need to move towards having the capacity to measure the health of decision making rather than just the results. So when I'm talking about decision-making process, I'm talking about a repeatable approach to weigh and sequence decision criteria to achieve an expected benefit. What does that mean? It means to have a process with a sequence, a standard sequencing of steps and decision points. I'm going to show you one in a minute. And a standard way of weighing, a weighting methodology, so that we can weigh, okay, the value of this revenue versus the value of this safety risk. We can weigh one against the other, because that's what we're doing in decision making. We have policy-based thresholds. You know, in every organization, we have these ethics policies, quality policies, and all those, and they have some standards of care built into them. They need to be built into upper and lower thresholds for decision making. And what I tell people all the time is you can have too much quality, you can have too much safety, you can have too much revenue, you can have too much profit, and you can also have too little. Okay. And we need an upper and lower limit on those things so that we can decide at what level is an acceptable level of benefit or risk. And then the measurability is the measurability of the health of the decision making against our standards of care. Are we making good decisions in process, not just in results? And good decision making processes are usually simple, scalable, agreeable, comparable, and measurable. I make them in a very simplistic way, and you're going to see some examples of that here. Where I learned decision making was way back in my history in the fire service in the 1980s. The fire service has a very simplistic and effective way for its fire chiefs and its fire officers in the middle, and the folks on the hose lines, and all of those folks making decisions exactly the same way with the same methodology. And right over here in that star in the middle, you're going to see the four things that we're constantly balancing and making decisions on at every emergency incident. And that responder safety and public safety are really a big one in terms of first choice, as well as balancing in between how much am I going to risk my responder for the benefit of the public. And that's a constant dynamic that goes on in an emergency scene. And then incident stabilization and property and environmental conservation, and the decision-making cycles in this order. Okay, life safety decisions first, and then juxtaposing responder against public, then incident stabilization, then property and environmental conservation. Every single person on the fire ground, no matter what their job is, whether it's strategic or tactical, makes decisions this way. And everybody watching them can see what they're doing and measure it, because they're all calibrated to this. It's a beautiful thing. If only organizations did this. So that's the point. So let me show you how this works, at least in a fire service dynamic. Our incident up here, fire department arrives and is called to a car fire. Upon arrival, the first arriving unit, which is this yellow engine, discovers a burning vehicle with an individual lying on the street next to the car. So now you picture this engine that's been dispatched to a car fire. They're driving down the road. They see this smoke, they see the fire, and they start to run through their training and their data collection. So before the incident even happens, we have a clear mission. Our mission is to make the situation better upon our response, okay? And in turn, balancing the life of our responders with the life of the public. We know our responsibilities, and everybody who responds knows the scope of their ability to make decisions on that fire ground. We plan these things, right? We know where the fires could happen. We know what could happen there. We know the water supplies. We plan all these things, and then we train and drill on the plan. And I'll tell you, this is one of the things I don't see organizations doing is drilling. And that is practicing scenarios before they happen. And in this case, practicing decision making. Okay. Now, during the incident, we collect data. Now we're collecting what's burning, what's going on, the extent of it, where's it going to go. We reconcile the data. Okay, we see people, we see property, we see situations that we need to be concerned about, and then we take that data and we reconcile it through this cycle of decision making. And this is how that works in that incident. And as you can see, we've got decision-making order 1 through 6 here, and it starts, of course, with life safety. That first fire officer, which is sitting in the right seat of that fire apparatus, looks at the situation as they're rolling up and says, okay, first thing I'm going to do is make sure that nobody else can get into the scene for the protection of the individual they see lying on the ground next to the car and whoever else may be in the car, as well as my responding responders getting off the fire apparatus. The next step is the police come in, they block the roadway so that nobody else can get in. We call the ambulance, they start rolling. The next step is those 2 firefighters move to rescue the victim. And again, we're putting, in that point, we're putting the lives of fires juxtaposed against the life of this individual. So we need to do that in a very protective way for our firefighters, hose line, PPE, all of those things. Once that victim is rescued, then the folks will take care of the victim, and the firefighters go back in to see if there's any other occupants. Again, life safety. Again, firefighters juxtapose their life against the lives of victims, right? Risk and benefit right here. And then once we have all clear where there's no victims, then this shifts gears into incident stabilization, okay? Which basically is fighting the car fire and putting the fire out, which is property conservation, and exposure preservation. And then again, the second shift is now when it's in non-emergency, fires out, we take care of the environment and whatever is spilled because it's not an emergency at that point. Okay, and that's how this rolls. And the important part of it, it's not a straight line. So if it gets to the point where a firefighter goes down, this stops and goes back to firefighter safety, right? This always goes back to the top. And so we're always looking at that order at every step along the way. It's not a straight line process. This is a dynamic risk-benefit reconciliation, constantly looking at data and correcting ourselves as we move along. Okay, so let's take this and let's move this into the business world. I had a few companies that I'd worked with that asked me to help them with their decision-making processes. One of them was a residential construction company. And this one, it was a commercial construction company. And the point that came up in their decisions in terms of bidding was, hey, maybe there's a better way to do this. And in this particular job, during the bid phase, they said, maybe we can lift some of these walls pre-made rather than putting people up on lifts and putting them together in the air. So they wanted a way to consider that effectively across their imperatives and values. Again, this normal process, the process they've been using, had been putting at least 3 people up in the air at 30 feet for a decent amount of time assembling this structure. And they were thinking about doing this on the ground. So I gave them a tool basically that on the top here, you can see their imperatives: cost, quality, schedule, employee engagement, efficiency, safety, environment, ethics, legal. Those are the things they thought were important in making decisions. Out of that, we said, okay, let's create an upper and lower threshold for each of these. So I worked with each of the leaders of each of these areas. and we came up with a 7-point uh, um, approach to this, which was basically 3 points of negative implication, a point in the middle that was nominal, and then 3 points of positive implication. Okay. So if you take a look at the color coding here, where it says color key, starting off, this would all be white, right? So if we're going to be starting from the 30 foot in the air, this would all be white with equal signs. Now we're going to lay into this the new process, which is basically building this thing on the ground. And we're going to, for each of these things, determine whether it's a negative implication or a positive implication on cost, quality, schedule, etc. So if it's a negative impact, this would be red. And if it was significantly negative, it would be 3+ signs. If it was moderately negative, it'd be 2+ signs. If it was just initially negative, it would be 1+ sign. So a weighting, if you will. Okay. White is neutral impact. It's exactly the same as the first way we were doing it, the original way. And green is 3 tiers of positive impact. So you can see we made decisions using that tool and looking at the new process, and you could see, decent amount of green here and no red here. So out of this easy process was a nice visual way of seeing, hey, there looks like a lot of positive implication to doing this the new way. And then you could dig into each of the ones down here on the bottom and take a look at people's work. And along with this certainly comes why they chose whatever it was. But you can easily and quickly see this seems like a good idea. Okay. It has no negative implications, only positive implications. And significant positive implications in the realm of safety, because now we've taken a construction process and eliminated the need to work at height for anyone. Okay. So that is a simple decision-making process that balances benefit and risk and then reveals the reconciliation, white, yellow, white, green, and red, of how much benefit and how much risk we have in a very simple visual way. Principle number 5, decision-making on the front line is predicated by decisions upstream. The decisions that your people make out in the shop or out in the field are set up by the environment that's created in those first 2-tier decisions. And that might be the speed they need to work at, the schedule, the tools, the investments, the staffing they have. All of those things are predicated on those upstream decision making. So those folks are trying to make decisions within the realm set up by them by those first 2 decisions. And a lot of times what I find is they're put what I call the fork in the road. And that fork in the road is the decisions they have to make between being productive and being safe, because we haven't interrelated those 2 things in the process that we're giving them. We're giving them choices. Okay. And I'm going to tell you right now, when you're not looking, people are going to choose the productive road because many times their perception is safe takes more time, more effort, slows me down, all of those things. One of the analogies that I do is I tell people a car moving forward is my analogy for productivity. So the faster the car moves, the more productive we are. And we know that the gas pedal makes the car more productive in that light. Is safety in your company the gas pedal or the brake pedal? And everybody will say, Pete, the brake pedal. And I'll say, that's not good. Okay. It is not good for us to keep thinking that safety can be the brake pedal. It should be the gas pedal. Now, how do you make safety the gas pedal? Well, you've got to interrelate it to productivity. You can't make it counterproductive, which in fact is most of what we create for safety solutions. They're counterproductive. They're extra time, extra cost, extra. And when people need to go fast, they shed extra. So again, leaders, as it says on the bottom here, leaders make the first decision, their workers make the last, and the last one is the one that counts. And the last one is the one that gets counted because schedule and quality and safety is on the front line. Okay, it gets measured by what they do. So we have to set them up so that the processes that we give them are just as productive as they are safe. I'll give you an example of where that's not the case. So I did this work for a company that basically supports airlines. They do front desk work. They do baggage handling. They have maintenance folks, crews that clean the plane. All of that work gets done by this company. And this particular company, when I asked them what their value proposition was, they said fast and cheap. And I said, uh-oh, this is going to be a problem, right? And so the other factor, if you don't know this, and if you haven't dealt on the flight line or you haven't dealt with aircraft, is the real prime priority when this plane comes in and goes out is schedule. Everybody's driven to schedule. And hey, look, we all sitting on the plane are hoping they meet the schedule too, right? So now here we have an individual who's trying to do their job, which is close this hatch, and they're standing on top of one of these tugs. And it's not a great work surface, and it's not necessarily a safe way to do their job. But you can see fast and cheap, and you can see that they don't want to hurt the airplane because there's nothing that's going to touch the airplane here, just the individual, right? So if we had something, as you can see over here on the left where this conveyor is, that's not even touching the aircraft either. So you got a fall hazard for this individual too. So the last thing they want to do is touch that plane, because if they touch that plane, everything stops. Okay, so now we've got two competing interests. We've got the productivity of this person, the safety of this person, and their competing interests, right? The safety of that person is in competition with the safety, the sustainability of the schedule. And anytime that happens, folks, you can see right here what's winning in that environment. And that's the way they operate every day. As a matter of fact, the supervisor's sitting there watching them do it. Okay. So this is by design in terms of how the company sets up its way of doing business. Just like go back to the grain company. The grain company had its way of doing business. Those first decisions made their way down through a weak management system, which in this case is never going to be able to withstand that kind of way of that manner of culture. And the processes are going to be designed around fast and no plane harm. And that's exactly what this person is working in, that kind of process, which creates a significant amount of risk to them and not a lot of risk to the schedule. And you're going to see that in spades in terms of measuring risk. And they saw that too. So that's how that dynamic works. And to get out of that dynamic, we've got to make better balanced decisions in organizations. And that right starts at that first tier of making decisions. Okay. One of the things, and unfortunately, I'm only able to fly at 10,000 feet here with you folks because this is a pretty deep set of subjects. But I'm going to give you some visual indicators as you go walking through a plant and you see anything that looks like this, people writing on things, people sending messages, people with custom tools, people with seemingly doing their own thing their own way. There's much more than what meets the eye to this. This is not, maybe these look like safety issues. They're not. Okay. These are people in the organization speaking out about the dysfunction of the organization in serving the risks that they see. Okay. That's what this is. So this is not about fixing the things they're talking about. This is about fixing the process of them being heard, the process of their problem being recognized. These are supervisor issues. These are leadership issues. These are HR issues. These are accountability issues, roles and responsibilities. There's all kinds of things that back up the dynamic of when somebody goes to write something like this and go out of their way to tell you something's wrong with the organization. Okay, heed those things, understand those things. I spent a lot of time talking to people in organizations to try to understand what I am seeing in that organization, those processes I'm seeing them do, and why they were set up that way, and what predicates them doing what they do and how that all happened. Because I'm trying to understand the health of decision making, where the decision making process is going awry, because we don't want these folks on the shop floor making unnecessary decisions between productivity and safety, which many of them are doing every single day. Principle number 6, decision-related roles and responsibilities and risk gatekeeping. This is something I wrote in one of my articles. And Scott, you can, at the end, we can give them access to those 15 articles in the SSP Professional Safety Journal. Decision-related roles, responsibilities, and risk gatekeeping. What does that mean? Well, in most organizations that I go to, just like in the grain company, when I start to move up into the senior management team or executive management team, what I find is, for safety and occupational health at least, is they don't have well-defined roles and responsibilities, and they don't know what their role is in risk gatekeeping. And what risk gatekeeping is their ability to make decisions on risk, not just benefit, within the scope of their realm of decision making. You know, whether it's somebody in HR, it's somebody in procurement, or it's an operations leader, they all are making decisions. And look, in organizations, functional folks like safety people make vertical decisions. We make safety decisions. We don't make operational decisions. Okay. We make functional vertical decisions, and we help people make functional vertical decisions as part of their job. Okay. We don't make business decisions. The business decision makers make business decisions. Those are the operations and the organizational business decision makers. They make decisions across all of the imperatives: quality, safety, cost, EBITDA, everything. They've got to make a balanced decision across all of those things. Okay. So as they're making those decisions, going back to that decision-making tool I gave to the construction companies, they've got to consider all of those expectations, and then they have to say, okay, I'm going to get this much benefit. How much risk comes along with that? And is the risk and benefit acceptable in each of those categories? That's a really important piece to making that first tier of decision sustainable and balanced all the way down to the front line of the organization. So what I created here was some guidance in terms of the functional decision makers. And here we get finance, business development, all the way down through reliability and maintenance, of what their decision points are in the organization and their gatekeeping role in those decision points, and in this case for safety. And what we need to be doing is establishing those roles and responsibilities with clarity in terms of, okay, what is your role? What is the scope of your responsibility in making decisions when it comes through HR, a new person gets hired, or who we're hiring, and all of that? And how does safety fit into that? And then here are the tools to help you make a good decision yourself. Okay. I don't think these people need to be calling safety folks every single day to make the decisions they make. We should be giving them the tools to make reasonably good safety risk decisions along with the benefit they're trying to bring along. If they're bringing in a new contract or a new supplier, a new chemical, whatever, they should be able to do that front end balancing themselves. And that should be their responsibility, and they should be accountable for that. And then for the ones that are, unique, special, different, then certainly, yeah, we can help them with that. But we need to set this system up to work effectively without us being there every single day. So, to wrap this up, I'm going to talk about each of these things and what I'll call a bit of a call to action for the folks listening. And that is what things I think you could get started doing. I know there's a lot here, but there are some things you could start doing for each of these principles. For the first principle, understand how this relationship works in your organization. Start to see what the elements of this relationship in your organization and how these things come together. Begin to see the organization through this lens. Determine how risk and benefit are being weighed today. How are those decision makers weighing risk and benefit? And if they're not weighing risk, let's say if they're not weighing safety risk, are we giving them the tools to be able to do that? Are we giving them the data to be able to do that? If not, help them with that. Okay. Learn more about benefit creation. Like I said, we're real experts in risk, and to us, benefit is less risk. Well, I'm going to tell you, there's benefit out there that has nothing to do with risk. Okay. We need to understand that because that is the thing that people are focused on, just like the grain company, right? That was all about business benefit. And the risk came along for the ride. Folks, benefit invites risk to the party. Okay. So if you don't know where the benefit's coming from, you're not going to see the risk coming. Be more savvy in benefit and understanding benefit. Evaluate the decision making in your tiers today. How are these decisions being made at a level 1, 2, and 3 today? Start taking a look at that. Start asking some questions. And then use the relationship to walk back the frontline decision. So what I'll typically do is I'll go to a plant and I'll look at a process and I'll see an unhealthy process, or I'll see somebody doing something that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, or somebody having to make a safety decision independent from a profitability or a schedule or a productivity decision. And I'll say that shouldn't be that way. And I'll walk back that decision to see how that decision was made, who made that decision, how did they balance, how did they look at things, right? Because now I'm trying to fix the decision-making process, not just the process that came out of it. You can chase processes for the rest of your life. Okay, go back and help design and redesign the way people make decisions. Build an OH&S decision-making guidance, or build guidance for people like I did in that construction example, in that 3 negative points, neutral point, and 3 positive points. Build something simple like that for your folks to say, okay, next time I come to a decision I have to make for safety, here's a simple way I can look at it and scale it in terms of changing hazard, changing exposure, things like that. Okay, you can make something simple they can use. That's the tool they can use in making their decisions. And then, again, create decision-related roles and responsibilities and gatekeeping responsibilities and tools, which includes number 6. For those folks that make decisions, sit down with them and say, okay, as part of your decision-making, how should you be considering safety? Where can you be considering safety? What should your role be? And start to set them up to be successful at that, so that the folks down at the coalface or even the plant managers don't have to juggle all of these unbalanced decisions and try to rebalance them, because frankly, they can't. They can't do it. So we need to fix the process. And these are some steps I think that you folks can start doing, or at least a couple of these things, and start figuring it out. Okay, so that's it for me. I hope I was able to enlighten you a little bit on this whole approach. There's a lot more to this, but if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. You can contact me. You can contact Scott. Scott, thank you again for the opportunity.